Welcome back to the Healer's Moon, where we talk about all things folk healing to help you cultivate a deeper, intuitive connection with the earth, your own body, and the heavens above. My name is Val, and I am your guide for this episode, so find a quiet space within yourself and let's dive in. This podcast episode has not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration, and anything discussed in this conversation is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Last week, we started the month by talking about the figurative healing grounds and how important it is for us to cultivate those strong roots. And this week, I wanted to talk about a plant that really embodies the healing ground, that root earth element, and one that can help us on this journey to developing our own healing grounds. And when I think of the healing grounds, the root, the core, the base of all things, my mind immediately jumps to burdock. And the first time you ever dig a burdock root, it's almost an otherworldly experience. It's not often, in fact, like never in my life had I ever seen a root so concentrated in one direction, so determined to reach the deepest depths of the soil, so focused. It seemed that the root would never end, and it's a sad day when you dig a burdock root only for it to snap before you're able to get the whole thing from the ground. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but I've definitely spent quite a few minutes afterward trying to recover the broken piece of root in the ground, but it's almost like the soil, the underland, reclaims it, swallows it up, and it returns to the underworld. And while the entire plant is medicinal, the root is what draws me back again and again. It breaks through the most compacted ground. It thrives in less than ideal conditions. It's a root that knows where it's going. And when attempting to build our own solid healing grounds, burdock is a plant we can look to in assistance on this journey. And like Odysseus on fascia, which we talked about in the last episode, we can find a place to rest, reflect, and grow with burdock. We can fall back on burdock. It's a stable place for us to land. When we drink an infusion of burdock, we picture our roots plunging into the darkness of the soil. Deeper and deeper we go, unconcerned with where we'll end up. Our only thought is to keep our roots, our life-giving taproot, focused in a pinpoint direction. As our roots increase in depth, so our leaves increase in size. They flourish in a beautiful rosette, growing higher into the sky, closer to heaven, as our roots grow deeper into the ground. The stronger our healing grounds, the stronger and more focused our aspirations. So now that we've been introduced to burdock, let's talk about where burdock likes to live. And spoiler alert, it is not picky, but my favorite place to harvest burdock is along the river within an old beech forest not far from my house. Here, burdock seems to be thriving in sort of this moist, shaded area, and when I walk on this trail, it feels as though I've entered some sort of tropical jungle with the tall canopy above me and just the absolute lushness and sheer size of the burdock growing here. It also helps that there's all sorts of beautiful native plants like lady's slipper and wild rose, columbine, blue cohosh growing alongside burdock. And a lot of people hate on burdock because they think it's a weed, but it doesn't seem to be really taking over in this space. It grows in tandem along with all of these other native plants, and maybe it's because of the shade, but regardless, it's just a beautiful place to walk. And burdock is so prolific and so rooted that even though it dies back during the winter, it's able to produce just these crazy huge leaves. And this is just another testament to its tenacity and strength, its dedication to the ground. Burdock also thrives in direct sunlight, wastelands, between cracks on the edge, literally just about anywhere it can find dirt. But perhaps maybe the most fascinating thing about burdock's growing habits is that it's a biennial. It grows into just this gigantic size plant, sometimes up to like 6 feet in just 2 years, only for it to die back completely by the 3rd year. While some shun its weed-like tendencies, us plant folk worship it for its generous medicine and extensive habitat. Most likely you have burdock growing around you. Maybe you don't know it. Maybe You've even had some of the burdock seeds tag along home with you. They kind of cling to everything. But let's get into the nitty-gritty, the meat, the magic of burdock. Let's talk about its medicinal uses. Burdock is an ancient medicine. Folk remedies from my native Poland talk about its use in all matters of the hair and skin to cleanse and soothe. They really focus on the leaves in that area of the world. It's a bit of a folk rule of thumb, too, that any plant with just these large, luscious leaves, such as burdock, is healing to the skin. And this goes back to the doctrine of signatures or plant spirit medicine, whatever you want to call it. But the leaves of a plant are how a plant breathes, where its pores are exposed to the world. This large surface area on these leaves of pores is much like that of our own skin, the largest organ system on our body. And as the doctrine of signatures suggests, like calls to like. The spiky seed heads are also often thought to look like actual heads, suggesting their use as a hair and scalp remedy. Old folk remedies call for just a strong infusion of burdock seeds to be used in soothing the scalp and cleansing the hair. The root, though, is where I feel most connected to burdock, and I want to start introducing the magic of burdock root to you by listing its medicinal actions, not because you should memorize all of these terms, but really just to give you an idea of the sheer magnitude of this plant's medicine. Burdock is a blood cleanser, an anti-inflammatory, lymph cleanser, anti-carcinogenic, liver protector, antiviral, antifungal, alterative, antibacterial, and it also nourishes the digestive and immune systems. Burdock contains just a wonderful stew of medicinal compounds such as antioxidants, inulin, caffeic acid, arctogenin, tannins, and other volatile oils. But all of these things that I just listed off, from the medicinal actions to the specific compounds, mean a lot of things and they mean nothing, because truly none of it matters if you can't feel the changes in your body, the subtle shifts, and the healing that the plant produces. This is one of the things that really hung me up when I first started learning plant medicine. I had such a strong connection to the plants, but as soon as I started trying to memorize terms, I immediately got overwhelmed. So instead, I just want you to take this in and sort of let it go, because I want to focus right now on the folk healer's method. Being a root chakra herb, burdock has an affinity for influencing the lower chakras most strongly. It has really strong manifesting energy. Burdock is an ally mostly of the digestive system, kidneys, and the liver first and foremost. But really, the beautiful thing about these root chakra herbs is that by fortifying our base, our root, we in turn influence all of the energy centers above it as well. We can see this in its strengthening influence on the immune system and nervous systems that we mentioned earlier. Energetically, these root chakra herbs, burdock especially, are able to dive deep into our energetic roots and just break up old stagnant energies and negative patterns. Thinking of this always brings me back to burdock's long taproot that just permeates through the most inhospitable, cracked, unfertile ground to get to where it's going. Personally, my relationship with burdock hinges on its ability to move these energies so drastically. I am a huge procrastinator. I've always been that way, and no amount of setting schedules, trying new routines, etc. has ever helped me. But when I started working with burdock as an overnight infusion that I drank, throughout the day, things really began to shift for me. It was truly almost like a miracle. I was able to stay focused, consistent, and I even got tasks done that I hadn't planned to, and that was just unheard of in my life. Of course, there are times when I don't have burdock root on hand to take on a daily basis, but when I do, I am noticeably more productive, and everyone is different, and every body reacts differently. But for someone like me who lives in their head a lot, and it can sometimes get disconnected from their lower manifesting chakras, and also someone who has a cold, damp constitution with slow, stagnant energies at times, Burdock was really able to transform my thoughts into actions. This is also a wonderful tonic and natural energizer to take during periods of burnout, when you're working on a big project or going through stressful holiday madness, when rest really isn't an option. I think Kat from Sacred Earth really said it best when she described burdock as throwing a nice, heavy log of oak onto the fire. This type of hardwood is wonderful for burning because it burns long and slow, sustaining heat for hours. This is opposed to other forms of caffeine or other energizers like coffee that would be like throwing a softwood log such as aspen onto the fire, which burns hot and quick, leaving you to crash and burn out after, the quick high that it provides. And with all of that said, I want to get into just a tad bit of the science behind here, since I think it is important to notice these patterns between the energy and the physical influence, and also sort of the plant spirit medicine, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Of course, all of the terms I mentioned earlier lend to burdock's energizing nature, its fortifying nature, but one I really want to focus on is the term alterative. If you haven't heard of this term before, alterative is a term that's been around for centuries. In 1621, it was defined in the book The Anatomy of Melancholy by Robert Burton as a medicine that works by changing processes within the body rather than by evacuating something. In modern-day medicine, it's defined as a drug used empirically to alter favorably the course of an ailment. Personally, I love Robert Burton's definition much more, and I just want to repeat it one more time to really grasp sort of the scope of the power of these sorts of medicines. Any plant that works like this is a medicine that works by changing processes within the body rather than by evacuating something. All in all, this is still a very vague term that essentially says an herb is able to balance the body in some way. Instead of putting a quick band-aid on an issue, alteratives work deep within the body to actually alter how it functions. Now, you may be thinking, this sounds a lot like an adaptogen, so what's the difference? The term adaptogen is actually a newer term that didn't come about until the 1940s. And these adaptogens contain a wide range of actions that help to protect the body from stressors and other noxious influences, but the main actions of adaptogens are to either raise or lower certain functions of the body. So, for example, if the immune system is overactive, it will regulate the immune response to decrease this overactivity. But on the other hand, if the immune system is depleted, it will strengthen the immune response to increase its activity. So also, I think it's important to note that these sorts of herbs, these adaptogens, have been labeled as such because they've been researched and studied extensively by science. For more of a distinction, while alteratives return the body to a vital state, adaptogens raise or lower certain functions to fit the needs of the body. Yes, still very vague, but it's something. And as I mentioned, to be considered an adaptogen, an herb has to really be researched extensively. So there very well may be other common alteratives that could be considered adaptogens or even have adaptogenic properties. We just haven't researched them enough yet. So in my mind, alteratives and adaptogens are kind of cut from the same cloth, if you will. But all of that aside, I think the term alterative truly describes how burdock works by restoring the body at the deepest levels. Some other big reasons burdock has such an influential effect on the body is for its affinity for the liver and digestive system, which I mentioned earlier. Burdock specifically reduces the inflammation of hepatocytes, which are cells that make up 80% of the liver. This helps to detox and protect the liver and kidneys. And keeping our liver healthy is so vital to our overall life force because the liver is the key organ that helps to keep toxins out of the bloodstream, which obviously is flowing through every single part of our body. It maintains healthy blood sugar levels. It assimilates nutrients along with hundreds of other vital functions. This is why burdock is also considered a blood cleanser and an important herb in the treatment of diabetes. So once we are able to clear the blockages of the liver, our bloodstreams and our energetic life force streams are able to flow easily once again. On top of that, I want to draw attention to a very important compound mentioned earlier called inulin. And I want to bring this up because if you read about burdock on the internet, many sources claim burdock contains insulin, which is not true. Inulin and insulin are two very different things. Inulin is a carbohydrate. It is a polysaccharide, which is a long-chain sugar. And it's a prebiotic compound found in the roots of certain plants like burdock and dandelion. And these sort of carbohydrates help to feed existing gut flora. Insulin, on the other hand, is a hormone that regulates carbohydrate metabolism. The existence of inulin in burdock, though, does in fact help balance blood sugar levels, as mentioned in its role upon the liver, which may be why there's some, mix-up between insulin and inulin, but it also helps to keep the gut flora landscape thriving. So taking burdock is like sprinkling compost and other amendments onto your gut. It's really just good food, good medicine for your gut. And its important role as a digestive prebiotic is the reason that it is one of the foundational herbs in almost all of my digestive bitter blends that I make here at Woodspell. While the flavor of burdock is only mildly bitter, it helps to balance out the other more potent bitters such as gentian. It truly acts as the root and the grounding force of a blend, just as it does upon the body. It has a nutty, sweet, demulcent type flavor that is truly unique and kind of surprising coming from a root. The sweetness is again due to those unique inulin compounds. And also I thought a fun note to mention is that burdock is also surprisingly considered an aphrodisiac. Obviously, it's not as exotic and luxurious like kava or damiana, but it has, been shown in lab tests to increase sexual function. And this is due, again, I'm sure, to the fortifying nature of the herb upon the body. With all of these things in mind, I hope you can now see how transformative burdock can be to work with, not only for its specific actions on one part of the body or the other, but for the healing grounds as a whole. It helps to stoke our fire, fertilize our roots, and build a strong foundation from which to function. So now let's talk a bit about how we can actually work with this amazing plant. I have two favorite ways of preparing burdock, though it's a very versatile herb. As mentioned, the leaves can be used as a poultice, or the seeds heads can be used as a hair rinse, but for the root, I love it as an overnight infusion or a glycerite. So let's start with the glycerite, because I feel like glycerites get a lot of hate because people think they aren't as potent as alcohol tinctures, but all menstruums have their own niches, whatever you want to call it. But they have their own constituents that they are experts at extracting, and glycerites in this instance are masters at extracting aromatics and those polysaccharides, that inulin, that natural carbohydrate or long-chain sugars. They're all basically the same thing. This is why a fresh root glycerite made with pure glycerin is a wonderful way to work with the medicine of burdock and receive all of those sort of delicate compounds that it contains. You may see when you tincture burdock that it gets a bit frothy over time. This is good though. This frothiness is actually the inulin that we talked about earlier, the prebiotic that feeds our gut flora. So if you see your tincture getting milky, you are on the right track. An alcohol-based tincture can also be made of burdock, though keep in mind that high percentage alcohol will destroy those delicate inulin compounds needed to feed our gut flora. So if you do this, only use about 50% solution when extracting burdock in alcohol. For assistance in grounding and cultivating our healing grounds, though, an overnight infusion is ideal. Pour hot water over the dried root and let that sit overnight to infuse. Make enough to drink for the entirety of the next day. There's nothing like a good, strong infusion of burdock in the morning. It instantly centers us and sets our feet on the ground and in the right direction. Just as its taproot knows where to go, it also knows where to point us. And it also gives us just this nutritious start that we need. The flavor of the infusion is like burdock itself, earthy and full-bodied. Many people combine burdock in a blend as a coffee alternative with herbs like reishi, chicory, and cinnamon. Burdock also, surprisingly, can be eaten kind of like a vegetable. Think like carrots. They're kind of shaped and look the same, though burdock can get much bigger. They can be prepared in many of the same ways too, and obviously adding wild foods back into our diet is deeply nourishing for the body and the soul as we build our healing grounds back up. In fact, in other parts of the world, burdock is a delicacy. In Japan, burdock is called gobo or takengawa, and it's deep fried, added to soups, mixed with seaweed, other veggies, and it's sauteed in sesame oil with ginger and soy sauce. And then similarly in Russia, burdock is used in a traditional soup called taiga stew, where finely chopped burdock root is combined with yellow dock root. And they also use the leaves in soups and purees, though these are a bit more bitter than the roots, so it really depends how much bitter you can take. But obviously, anytime that we can get bitter plants, bitter compounds into our body, the more our life force, our prana is able to flow, our digestive system gets back into balance, back into order as well. And burdock is a great plant to just incorporate on a daily basis since it is so safe to be able to build those back up. And so we've talked about sort of all the practical things, the medicinal uses, where it lives, all of that great stuff, but burdock is much deeper than that too. So let's look a little bit at sort of the lore, the plant spirit medicine of burdock. And aside from its physical healing actions, burdock is considered bear medicine across many cultures. Its Latin name Arction in fact means bear plant in Greek. The physician Dioscorides knew it by this name, suggesting that there were ancient shamanic uses for it even before Greek and Roman times. And then further north in Germanic and Celtic tribes, they also knew burdock as bear medicine. And just as a side note, people labeled plants as bear medicine if they were very large, mighty in healing, or even very hairy looking. Plants that bears eat in the wild were also considered bear medicine. This is a nod to the doctrine of signatures that we talked about a little bit earlier, and these northern tribes dedicated burdock to Thor, the god of thunder and lightning. Like Thor and bear, burdock is burly, strong, and powerful. It makes sense that this tenacious plant would belong to these beings. In northern Germany, burdock was called Donnersbladen, or thunder leaf, in honor of Thor. The leaves were hung from houses as protection from lightning, and when praying for assistance from Thor, burdock would always be included in these rituals. And then, when burdock was brought over to Turtle Island, the indigenous people here also attributed burdock to bear medicine. They noticed how the seed heads looked hairy, making it a prime candidate for bear medicine, as many indigenous people from other parts of the world also notice. And this just obviously blows my mind every time how the messages and medicine of plants can transcend distance and language and culture. They truly are special, special beings on this planet. And from Japan to Russia to Turtle Island, bear is considered a healer or medicine man amongst animals. He is fierce yet wise. And in our quest to build our foundational healing grounds, there is no better medicine to call upon than bear medicine. Taking in all of the physical, medicinal, spiritual, and energetic properties of burdock, we can now understand what a great ally it is to the healing grounds. Working with burdock in tonic form on a daily basis is so beneficial to building up our vigor, stamina, and overall health, truly helping us to embody that bear energy and become the healer that he represents. This is a plant that we can fall back on, that we can rest on, that we can draw inspiration from. So I hope next time you get a little burdock burr stuck on you somewhere, you figure out where it came from and start working with all aspects of this plant, and specifically the root if you want to use it as a means to start building those healing grounds again. And so that concludes this episode. I am so excited to continue our conversation about building our core healing grounds with next week's episode with our first interviewee. His name is Nathan Wright. He is a water protector, a member of an Anishinaabe tribe here in Michigan. He's an activist, an herbalist, and he's going to be sharing some wonderfully generous stories with us, so I can't wait for you to be a part of that conversation as well. So until next time, my friends, take care of yourselves.